Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of NHLN Opinion Plus, a new weekly series coming at you every Friday. This is a space for our opinions where we talk about current events and questions the Latino community are curious to know. Today, we are joined by Ahni Malachi, Executive Director for the New Hampshire Commission for Human Rights. Director Malachi was appointed in 2018. Prior to her current position, she was a public service manager at Hearst Television for 6 years. Welcome, Director Malachi, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much, Baylin. I appreciate the invitation and I'm already excited.
Of course, and thank you. Yeah, me too. I'm excited for a conversation. To start off, for those unfamiliar with the New Hampshire Commission for Human Rights, it operates alongside the state's law against discrimination regarding employment, housing, and places of public accommodation. I'd like to start a conversation by hearing you go over exactly what the Commission does on a day-to-day basis and what are its longer-term goals and accomplishments.
Certainly. So the commission started in 1965, and so it's been around for a very long time. It is probably one of the best kept secrets, I would say. There are a lot of people in the state that don't know that we exist, but we are doing all that we can to make sure people know where to find us and how to find us, and if they are in need, that they can find us. Back in September of 2019, education, so K through 12 education, was also added to our statute. So if there are any students that feel like their rights have been violated or they've been discriminated against in the forum of education, they can certainly reach out to us. And in the interim, it would be an adult, a parent, more than likely, that would give us a call.
Okay, thank you for that. It's a great explanation. So we're having this interview during a very interesting time when the nation is having an ongoing discussion about Black and Brown lives in the U.S. and the systematic ways they're being oppressed. Of course, the Commission of Human Rights is likely well-versed in these topics, but other governmental entities, industries, and individual companies and concerned citizens are now examining their potential roles regarding racial and ethnic diversity and equity across the U.S. Has this general heightened awareness could have impacted your work in any way this year?
So for us, it has not changed how we do what we do. We consistently take cases as it relates to discrimination, whether it's ethnic, whether it's racial, whether it's religion, disability, age. We take all cases. At this time, we have not seen a specific uptick in cases dealing with ethnicity or race. We customarily see more in the area of disability, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So many people are very surprised by that, and I am too, actually. And usually it's a very simple situation where, as it relates to a business, someone could make an easy accommodation, but there are businesses that may not be aware that accommodations can be made or should be made, or they're just not very well versed in what we call the interactive process, so that the person with a disability who is needing certain assistance to get the job done can have that assistance with the help of their doctor giving the information to their employer to make whatever small changes that might be made to help that employee meet the qualifications and standards of the job so that they can continue to be employed there.
Okay, thank you for that. That is very interesting. So what is the easiest way then for employers and then employees with disabilities to really learn about making these accommodations? You said they could go to basically their doctor, or could they go to another governmental entity? What's like the recommended way?
Sure. So, and that's a really good question. Disability seems to be a really interesting one. So if someone has a disability, and sometimes it's someone who is initially hired that has a disability, or someone who's worked somewhere over time, if they have a job where they do repetitive motion, and let's say the person develops carpal tunnel, for example, or they have a degenerative disc disease, for example, that individual is going to be under a doctor's care. And with the understanding of any prescription medications that they need or adjustments. Maybe they need a different chair. Maybe they need a different desk, something that will lift and lower so that they may stand or be able to put the keyboard area at a different height. Then with the working with their doctor, the doctor will then say, hey, these are the things that you need. These are the tools that you need that can ease the pain that you're having. So that person would then go to their manager and or their human resources department, usually start at the management level, your immediate supervisor, and explain to them what the difficulties are and what it is that you're looking for. And what is happening at that point is the employee is entering into the interactive process with the employer so that the employer can then work with the employee to assist. If there's anything in writing that's needed, then the employee will then communicate that to their physician, who will supply the appropriate paperwork. And doctors are aware of their responsibility and the types of paperwork that they need. Some businesses are very well situated, and they have very specific paperwork that they need filled out, and that's completely appropriate for the human rights, excuse me, not human rights, but the human resources individual to send that information to the doctor. And the physician for the employee, as well as a representative of the company, can communicate together. They don't always have to go through the employee. But what the employee should know, as well as the employer, is that all of that individual's medical records would certainly not be released. Only specific information that is relevant to any sort of an accommodation that that individual is requesting, those things are important. But if it's outside of that, then it's not relevant. So the employee shouldn't be concerned about not having their privacy protected, and the employer does not have rights to anything other than specific information as it relates to the accommodation that the employee is asking for. And in the midst of all that, if there's assistance needed, if the employee has questions, what should I provide? How should I go about doing this? If the employer has questions, how much information can I ask for from the employee? Am I supposed to give this person an accommodation? Any of those questions, either party can reach out to us here at the commission to ask those questions. Now, we don't represent either side. We're not attorneys, we don't give legal advice, but we can talk to both individuals, the employee or the employer, to help them better understand what the law stipulates so that everyone knows what their responsibilities are within that.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And from my knowledge, the Commission works to protect New Hampshire individuals from discrimination within certain matters. But does the Commission ever get involved with public policy work by any chance?
So that's a good question. So it's kind of a yes and no. We don't necessarily advocate for laws. However, we can participate. So let me work on that a little bit there and try to break that down.
Sure.
Every legislative cycle, the different legislators will submit bills. Last session, and it was a really weird session because of COVID, but last session there were several bills that were relative to RSA 354-A, which is the New Hampshire state statute that established the Human Rights Commission. And it gives us, it lets everyone know what our jurisdictional area is, and the things that we're responsible for, and how we do what we do. Really, it sets all of that forth. So at any point in time, if there is a bill that is proposed that affects our statute, then we, as the agency, have an opportunity to speak for or against said bill. Now, customarily, if there are any sort of financial possibilities where we may have to add more staff or have a larger building or anything along those lines, we're asked to give what's called a fiscal note. and that is attached to the actual bill. And if you look up the bill number and the Human Rights Commission had to give a fiscal note, that information is included. So I work really hard not to necessarily speak against something or even for something, but I am there as an expert when I go to give testimony so that the legislators have questions they can ask. They'll understand if this particular bill passes and there's a fiscal note attached, meaning we have to hire more staff, then they need to understand what that looks like, what the cost is, because if there's a cost to make sure that these additional rights are protected, then everyone needs to understand what that looks like. And there were quite a few bills last cycle. There's another one that I believe will come back maybe this legislative cycle, which dealt with pregnancy protections. So in our statute, pregnancy is protected. However, this particular bill would make it very, very clear so that you didn't have to read through all of the disability in the area of disability to try to piece together and understand how pregnancy is covered. This would make it very specific and very clear so that anyone looking at our statute would understand that we cover pregnancy. And I hope that answered your question.
Yes, you did. Very in depth, but also I appreciated the examples. So lastly, before we go, the Concord Monitor reported this June that you joined the governor's new commission on law enforcement, accountability, community, and transparency. Could you explain for all of us the new commission's purpose and how its members plan to achieve that?
Excellent. Yes, yes. That was an amazing experience to be on such a commission that had such a wide variety of people. There's the Commissioner of Safety, Bob Quinn, Director Skippa. He is the new Director for Police Standards and Training. There were people from the ACLU. There were representatives from the community. Chief Eddie Edwards, he's a former police chief. He's retired, so he was a community member. And then there's a young lady who was a member of Black Lives Matter, who was also a community member that was representative on the commission. And we had another gentleman who is a public defender who was there. And I know I'm forgetting people, and I apologize. It's all, of course, because you're asking, it's all escaping my mind at this moment. But suffice it to say, it was an amazing experience. We had an opportunity to really work together as a team, to listen to information given to us as testimony, and to be able to ask questions, to digest that information, and then come together and work diligently to put forward recommendations for the governor. So he specifically did this. He created an executive order which created the commission and gave us our authority. And we were to look at the areas of accountability for police officers, their presence in the community and community relations, and then ultimately transparency, making sure that rules and regulations and how law enforcement operates was transparent to the community, especially in a situation where there was anything that was suspected wrongdoing, so that the public could feel confident that what was happening in terms of taking care of any of the wrongs, that the public could feel comfortable that these things were handled properly and that any punishments were appropriate, or if the police officer or officers were cleared of any wrongdoing, that was appropriate as well. And so with that being said, one of the recommendations we suggested, and the governor accepted, and he accepted all 49 of our recommendations. One of them was for us to remain together as a unit so that we could lend a level of oversight over the recommendations to make sure that things were moving forward. And if there at any point were items that needed to go before the legislature because there was funding that was needed, or there were statutory changes that needed to take place, the body known as the commission, the LEACT commission, could come together, and certain ones of us or all of us could go and give testimony to support why we felt it was important that we made this recommendation in the first place, but in the second place, why it is important to make any statutory changes, any rules changes, or to create the financial backing to make sure that those changes took place for the good of the public.
Right. Thank you for that. That's amazing. I'm really glad we were able to talk to you and get your insight on that. I'm excited to learn more about it. Yeah, and see those was suggestions or recommendations?
Recommendations. So some things were suggested, but overall, even the suggested things were recommendations for suggestions, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay, gotcha. Amazing. Thank you for talking with us, Director Malachi, and for being our guest on NHLN Opinion Plus.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I've enjoyed this time.
Me too. I've learned a lot. So for everyone to tune in next week for another episode, follow us on Twitter at NH Latino News and Instagram at NH_Latino News. I'm Belen Dumont with NHLN Opinion Plus. See you next time.